Hope you all enjoyed your lunch. Just for the purposes of accessibility and inclusion, in case anybody watching has a visual impairment, I am a white woman with shoulder-length brown hair, although if you look closely you can see some grey, and I'm wearing a grey and neon pink leopard print dress. And I'd like to invite my wonderful panel to introduce themselves. If we could maybe start with Katie at the end and then work down.
Hello, I'm Katie. I work for Lord Taverners as the programme manager with a specialist focus on women and girls. Lord Taverners is a cricket charity, but an inclusive one. We provide free year-round cricket for people living in areas of deprivation and people with disabilities. Alongside that, we also provide workshops around life skills. This could be anything, mental health, knife crime, whatever the community needs and the young people want, we deliver it. Love it.
Hi everyone, my name's Joanna. I'm a data analyst at UK Sports Institute. For those who don't know, UKSI, we provide world-class services to world-class sports, so our Olympic, Paralympic sports, so think GB aquatics or GB basketball. I sit in the performance data team, but our organisation has nutritionists, psychologists, strength and conditioning coaches, probably more, but I've lost it. So yes, nice to be here with everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Jo. I'm the co-founder of Birdsoup. You can ask me afterwards what that means. We are people transformation consultancy, so we work with organisations delivering leadership programs, workshop coaching, and helping them create inclusive cultures. I've been involved in grassroots football for about 15 years, first as a parent and then as a coach for my son's team. And then after he left for university, I missed the involvement. So I joined the London FA Council in 2019. I've been on the board for 18 months now as a non-exec director, and I lead on women and girls football. And I'm very proud to say that rather late, I started my football career, and yes, I am calling it a career, in 2019.
Well done.
Playing.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlene Gravesande. I am the new founder and CEO of Inc. Media. It's a sports media production company specialising in football and Formula One content. When I say new, literally 6 months ago, I founded my company. I was previously at Sky Sports for 16 years. I know I don't look like it. But yeah, previously at Sky Sports for 16 years, producing live content. I became the first and only black woman to produce Formula One content. And we won a BAFTA in 2021 for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. The year before, I was named on the football blacklist as an influential person within the media after creating a film called George Floyd, 100 Days On, How Sport Fought for Change. And that film also won an SJA award.
Can we have a round of applause? For the wonderful panel. So we've heard a lot from the talks this morning, obviously about great progress in women's sport. We're here today to talk a bit more about how the wider ecosystem around sport, from grassroots to elite level, from media and broadcast through to the sort of science that sits behind that, the data that supports performance sport, and then from a sort of coaching and leadership into the boardroom of sport, the business of sport, how we can build a more representative and inclusive ecosystem. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists the same question. From your perspective of where you sit in the organisation you've either founded or you work for or with, if you had to give that ecosystem a rating from 1 to 5 with how representative and inclusive you feel it is today, what rating would you give it and why? And can we start with you, Charlene, please?
So 1 being poor.
1 is poor, 5 is tip-top.
Okay. Well, one of the reasons why I decided to found my own business was because I felt there was too many excuses within sports media, not only within broadcast media, but media in general. As a black woman, I constantly find that when they talk about representation, it's always on screen and front-facing rather than the things that people do behind screen. So for me, in terms of post-production, I come up with from ideation right through to post-production. So I do everything except actually filming, camera work and stuff. So I felt that change wasn't happening quick enough. I understand that change does take a long time, but how long are we going to wait? So instead of waiting, I decided to, go it alone and be quite bold and found my own company. And I've been really intentional about making sure that the people that I do bring on board does represent wider society. Recently, we worked with a football charity called Football Journeys, and we did some work with them at QPR's football ground last month. And I'm happy to say that every single person that worked on the production that day was female and from an ethnically diverse background. So when people say they can't find talent, they're lying. Talent is 100% there, they're just probably looking in the wrong places. And we'll obviously talk about what action we can take to, help, other organisations be able to do that. So roundabout way, Suzy, I'd probably say mine at the moment is a 4. I know I can probably do better. I've made sure that in terms of LGBTQ+ and disability, I have those within my organisation as well. And, I feel like somebody that comes from South London, there is a lot of multiculturalism within the spaces that I work in. And I'd like to be the person that doesn't just talk the talk, walks the walk as well.
That's great. And over to you, Jo.
That's quite a hard one to follow. I would say, and I'm kind of talking about from a grassroots football point of view, because that's kind of where my sort of expertise is, I'd probably say 2.5 out of 5. And I'd say that because there's been massive progress, and obviously the women and girls game is growing at a rate of knots. But I think there's a lot of really good intention, there's a lot of progress, but there's a lot of work to do in terms of the infrastructure required to support getting investment into the right places and kind of getting really a coordinated effort. It's difficult because you see the numbers and you think, oh yeah, the year-on-year increases look fantastic. But when you look at the numbers versus the potential, there's a lot of work to do. That's probably a bit harsh, but realistic.
That's great. And Joanna?
I'm going to go for 2.2 for representation as well.
Data
Oh wait, 2.2. And then that's for representation. In terms of inclusivity, I'd probably give that a slightly higher and maybe 3.45. I think inclusivity, right? High performance elite sport is very small. There's not a lot of us, and the people that are already who work in high performance come from a small group of society anyway. So it's hard to get new people in anyway, and especially when you're working with such a small kind of percent of the population, we're just not there in terms of representation, in terms of the workforce looking like the general population. However, inclusivity, I would say we're doing great things. The people there are genuine. They want new people to come in. They want to be more representative, but money, jobs, just kind of people applying to those roles, we're just not there. So, yeah, that's my ratings.
And finally, Katie?
So I just want to clarify, I'm talking from my charity point of view, not cricket in general, because I think most of you in this room might think it's shocking because cricket, unfortunately, is still very far behind with the times compared to other sports, which is heartbreaking, although there has been huge progress. Lord Taverners, for me, it has to be a 4.5. I don't want to give it a 5 because there's still more work that I like to do and we've got to do. But our charity started for inclusion. It's embedded with representation and inclusion. That is what we're all about. We have moved forward significantly. We're seeing more female hubs than ever before, more female coaches, more female development officers. Our leadership, right from the top, right to the bottom, I don't like the hierarchy, but that's just easier for me to say, has a wonderful range of women from diverse backgrounds to disabilities. I myself have ADHD. I call it my superpower, so if I talk very quickly, this is why. We truly do believe that representation isn't about fitting young people into the existing cricket model. So that so clearly doesn't work, particularly for the new generation. It is about reshaping it and making it representative and reflective of the young people, but from different communities. Every single community across the UK have different women and girls in it, and it's so, so important that we are representing and recognising that within our charity. I'm so sick of programmes being created that don't reflect or represent some of the young people, and it's about time that we kind of start working with them rather than for them.
Hear, hear.
That's great. The thing I forgot to say is this panel will be open for questions. So sorry to the organiser, I didn't mention that at the beginning, but if you have any questions that you'd like to ask any of the panellists, please use the app, and I have got the iPad and I can look at those later. Just moving on then, if that's a sort of current status, varying from sort of nobody's got the top marks yet, I'd like to really delve into what some of those barriers are. So what are the barriers that are preventing more diverse representation or a more inclusive environment where diverse talent can thrive? And that could be physical barriers, digital barriers, attitudinal barriers. Does anyone want to have a go at answering that first, and then we can...
I don't mind jumping in. So one thing that I found with high-performance elite sport, the people move around jobs, so you kind of stay within the system. So when we're hiring new people, they're not really new. They've either worked at a different sport organisation, or they're a friend of a friend who has links. And we already know we're an unrepresented system anyway, so we're just kind of self-fulfilling prophecy almost by hiring the same people that are in the system. So that's one thing that I've really found, is that within sport, we're not hiring out of sport, and sometimes that's where the diversity is. That's where we should be looking. So one thing I found is that if we're just hiring mates, or if we're just hiring someone who already have an experience of sport, that's really kind of holding us back. So that's one barrier that I found.
Great. Charlene, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what you said there. For me, I found within my career there was a lot of nepotism. So there would be people that would come into the industry, and there would be, a sister or a daughter of, a former, Premier League manager or footballer or something like that. And just to pick up on what you said, Joanna, I think it's so important to make sure that the people that you are bringing into your organisation is reflective, as I said previously, of society. So if you're just constantly bringing in people that have had previous jobs, that maybe like BBC Sport, ITV or whatever, those are the same people. And, it becomes very difficult for you then to have a representative, ecosystem if it's just the same people over and over again. So obviously this is about action and the kind of things that we need to do. So one of the things that I did at my time at Sky Sports was make sure that the jobs and things that they are posting go onto different platforms. Because if you're constantly posting to the same organisations and the same universities, and you're getting the same internships and apprenticeships, it's just literally robots. You're just having one person go in and come out, and then it's just basically the same model over and over again. So making sure that your organisation and your corporation is posting to different places. For instance, the Voice newspaper is the only black newspaper within the UK. They have a place where you can, put jobs and stuff, put placements and stuff to organisations and platforms like that. You will then see people that, will look at those particular places and think, oh, that is reflective of something that I believe that I can do, but it's in a platform that I would usually read anyway. Most of the time that I found at my time at Sky Sports was that it was just literally just the same model, constantly the same thing over and over again. So it's just about changing the ways and your mindset in terms of how you think, because the model at the moment, in this moment in time, isn't working. So it's just about trying to, change those perceptions and making sure that you are representative of society.
That's great. Do you have anything to add, Joe, about barriers?
I just wanted to raise something that's a bit of a bugbear of mine. So we work a lot with organisations that, say we don't have enough women in our leadership pipeline, we don't have enough female candidates coming through. If you look at, I think, 2/3 of National League football clubs are all male boards. 11% of Premier League clubs have one woman on their board. 4% of Championship teams have a woman on their board. When I think it's 40% for the FTSE 100, that's an absolutely terrible stat. And, to points that Joanna and Charlene have already made, the women are there and they're super capable. And I know we're talking about women and girls sport, but, there's a lot of contribution women can make to those businesses. And I picked up on something that was said in the panel before lunch, which said there's a lot of mistakes been made in male sport, that, having that different, diverse voice is going to help. So I think, if anyone is involved or has any influence or wouldn't consider putting themselves forward as a candidate, then you need to do it.
Sorry, can I just jump back in there? I think also when we're talking about gender and equity and equality, I think most of the time, I don't know whether you're going to pick up on it a bit later, but I'm just going to go ahead, sorry. Most of the time, from my perception and lived experience, we always will speak about gender, but from a white woman's perspective. And if we're going to be inclusive, we need to make sure that we're not forgetting the other voices. So, you know, there's a lot of misogynoir within sport. So I don't know whether you want me to continue or you're going to pick up.
Carry on.
Yeah, so if anybody doesn't know what misogynoir is, it's a term coined by Moya Bailey, which looks at, you know, referring to the anti-racism and misogyny specifically directed at black women. And for me, in terms of my own lived experience, being one of the only, so since I left Sky Sports, I was the only black female producer in the whole of Sky Sports. And that might shock many of you because, you know, Sky Sports is actually a massive organisation and, you know, corporation. And there are a lot of women, not only on screen, but, you know, in post-production that look like me, that aren't being given opportunities for whatever reason. And I find that quite a lot of the time, so obviously our panel is very diverse, but quite a lot of the time when we are speaking about gender equality, black women and people from other ethnic backgrounds are always missed out of the conversation. So I just wanted to bring that up to make sure that even though we are speaking about representation and we're bringing women into the conversation, it needs to be all women, and the representation of all women needs to be heard.
I agree, and actually something I'm very cognizant of is disabled women are often not included, or there are particular barriers as well. So I think looking at this from an
intersectionality.
You can love or hate the word intersectionality, but we all know what that means, and I think it's really important to not just focus on women as a homogenous group, if that's the right word to describe it. Thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a really important part of the conversation. And Katie, did you have anything to talk about in terms of barriers?
I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about barriers, because I'm sure most women in the room, or your friends or family or sisters, if you think back to the barriers that existed for you, unfortunately, they probably still very much exist today. But I want to kind of talk about, we did a lot of research with our women and girls. We're very passionate about youth voice. It's absolutely the heart of absolute everything we do. They're involved in all our decision makings. We've got a youth ambassador program, which has a wide range of high representation of women and girls, both from our disability and deprivation program. So we actually asked our girls, what is preventing your friends, family from getting involved in cricket? Number one was 78% said the lack of role models or relatable people they can look up to. I know this isn't a... This has been mentioned quite a lot throughout this, but actually 65% of those 78 mentioned the importance of understanding women's health and periods. That is what would put them off. And the second one was the wrong activity being delivered. They don't want to focus on elite cricket skills. They'd much rather focus on their motivations, such as the fun, social side, and having mixed sessions, the boys, telling them that it's a boys' sport. Unfortunately, cricket's very deeply rooted stereotype is that it's a man's game. I even got told it when I was a kid. I asked to play the cricket at school and got told I can play rounders, which to this day angers me to my core, and I hope no other young girl experiences that, because I think it's appalling. And finally, the one is, of course, facilities. 65% said the wrong facilities without the right changing facilities, and unfortunately, cricket clubs were designed, again, for men, and a lot of them still have only male changing facilities. And just around kind of the awareness of how to get involved in was another one. But yeah, I'll shut up now because I've got loads ringing my head.
No, don't worry. We want this to be a really interactive session. And we've started to touch on some of the how change can happen. But I'm just going to go back to my original question around if we were going to give this a mark, if we're marking our homework. To get from the score you gave at the beginning to be 5 out of 5, what change needs to happen from this sort of perspective you're coming out, whether that's media and broadcast, talent on screen, talent behind the camera, whether that's from a sort of grassroots football, but also governance and leadership of sport, whether that's from the sort of, we talked about this earlier, the team behind the team, but it's not really the team behind the team, it's the team that's part of the team. You're part of the team driving that high performance sport for those Olympic and Paralympic sports. And then Katie, from a sort of that sort of very community-focused, grassroots cricket basis. What change would need to happen and how do we get there? If there are things that you've experienced, there are things that you've put in place, there are programs or initiatives you've been part of shaping or been part of that others could learn from, I think this is a really good opportunity to bring that forward. And remember, again, thank you, Charlene, for reminding us, this is about increasing representation in women's sport. It's not just about getting more white women involved, it's about getting the opportunities for every woman to be involved. So who wants to start with?
I don't mind going again. I know I'm baffling on a lot about youth voice, but it truly is the foundation. If you're going to identify the barriers with the youth, then why on earth are you trying to change those barriers without including them in an effective way? I'm very, very passionate about it. I just think for too long now we've been putting things in place that just don't work. So I want to share some of the quick wins that we've had from including the youth and co-designing. The first one is around engaging with the wider audience for female coaching. This is a really difficult barrier that exists. We work with a lot of Muslim cultures and they don't always understand or are wanting to get involved in cricket, but actually we realise that a lot of them come and watch their daughters play cricket. So we realise that the parents, the carers that are coming to the sessions are probably the most effective way of how we can increase our female coaches. We've got a project in Luton and we now have engaged with 10 mums. They are now qualified coaches. We completely paid for their coaching and we've seen around 150 girls taking part in cricket. This time last year there was around 40 girls, but because they have someone that they can relate to and understand, the young people specifically said when we asked them who their role models are, the majority said their mums. So why are we not trying to get them involved in our community sessions when they're already there? The second one is our participants. We offer leadership workshops, we do young leaders, we've got a wide range of qualifications that we can offer them, and we've had some huge success of them starting off as participants, and now they are coaches, and we've even got one girl who is now a development officer managing the project in her area, which is absolutely amazing, and it really does work. It's so simple, it's so effective. I would encourage it throughout. And the final point is around changing the game and making it more fun and exciting. I certainly know if someone was bowling a hard cricket ball at me or spin bowling, I would be bored and put off and actually quite scared of the ball. And unfortunately our coaches, a lot of them are still male. However, we've provided training around how to be more inclusive for women. We've got the young people involved by creating coaches principles for the men, not all men, also the women. Some of the men have sisters, so they are fully equipped on understanding some of the needs and challenges that the girls go through. Some of these include not batting alone to avoid embarrassment, making sure any new participant has a buddy at the session, and they create some of the sessions. So we've had Pac-Man cricket, Hungry cricket, which is literally like Hungry Hippos and hilarious. And my favourite is glow-in-the-dark cricket, has been implemented across all of our girls' sessions. In Southampton, there was an open day for women and girls in the community with glow-in-the-dark cricket. It's exactly as it sounds. The lights go off, there's tape, UV tape, they're wearing paint everywhere. It's amazing. We engage with 30 new young women and girls into the session by simply offering and changing the game. That is way more fun. So yeah, I could keep going on again, but I'll leave the panel to talk.
Great, and anyone can catch up with Katie or find her on LinkedIn afterwards. So Joanna, from your perspective, how would we get from that, was it 2.2 to 5 and that 3.4 to 5? And what have you experienced or what in your view would work the best?
Yeah, so for me, if you want to increase representation, you've got to do something. You've got to make initiatives. You've got to get more people in the door. So one initiative that I'm a part of that's been spearheaded by UK Sport. So there is Aspire to Lead programme. So there was a challenge in high performance sports. There's not enough black leaders in senior positions. UK Sport have put money behind that and said, bet, we're going to change that. So we're the first cohort, there's about 25 of us. UK Sport have put on a year-long leadership programme, 4 modules over the year. These modules take place over 2 days. They pay for our accommodation, they pay for our food. We have coaches, we have leaders, we have online modules in between these as well. UK Sport have actively said, we want to change this representation, so we are going to put money behind it, and we're going to actively teach these young, not even young people, these leaders or people working with the sport. So we're all from ethnically diverse backgrounds, and we're going to give them the skills to hopefully be that change. And I think it's important to note that 2.2 isn't going to move to 5 in the next year. And UK Sport have been very open and transparent with this. They said this is a lifelong leadership program realistically, and that for me is what we need to do and what we need to focus on as well, putting leadership programs in place and seeing those long-term benefits and kind of just putting your money where your mouth is, to be honest, because a lot of these programs, they do cost money, but if you care, you'd pay.
Can I just ask, have you been able to provide any feedback that will shape that program for cohorts that will come?
Oh yes, and I say that not to say the feedback has been critical, but they've been so open to it with the first cohort, and because we can tell the people organising have such passion and they're so genuine and they want this. There is a purpose, and the purpose is to increase representation in high-performance sports. We're 100% behind that, and so we are constantly giving feedback. They've been so open to that. One of our modules, for example, our 4th module, was meant to be something. We all didn't like it, and we said we think it could change and can change, and it did change. And the value of them listening to us, because, you know, we feel important, we feel heard, and it's been an absolutely brilliant leadership program. I don't know if there's anyone from UK Sport in the room, but yeah, big up yourself. But if you've got any questions...
She wants more money.
But honestly, if you've got any questions about the program, I'm happy to talk about it. But it's been an absolutely amazing program that I'm hoping continues for a long time. But yeah, that's just one way how you can really increase representation just by leadership programs.
That's fantastic, thank you. And Jo, over to you. What would make it a 5? What needs to change?
I think it is about funding. It's about putting money where your mouth is. I'm just going to mention a couple of really small things. There's been some brilliant examples from Katie and Joanna. So at London FA, before I was on the board actually, I was the co-chair of the Women and Girls Advisory Group, and we wanted to kind of do something that was going to make a real difference. So we pitched for some funding to create a facilities fund for either new teams or teams that weren't getting access to facilities, and we opened it up to, you know, massively diverse groups that would never have got access to anything before, and they had to pitch, and the people that got through had to kind of really set out what they were going to do, and it was followed up. And I know there's a lot of discussions this morning around data, and I think it is around, there's a lot of really good stuff going on, but it's proving the difference that it can make, and that, you know, it's sustainable and you can measure the difference, rather than just saying, well, yeah, you can have this bit of money and you can go away and, you know, no one's going to notice any difference. So I think that's one thing, and I feel like facilities are, unfortunately, the thing that costs the most money and the longest to get built. But without them, you can't do any of the things in terms of including those getting those more diverse audiences involved. And then London FA have also done some great work in putting on tournaments for, you know, underrepresented groups in, you know, areas of London that, you know, don't necessarily have that many teams or that many opportunities. So it's all those small things that combine to have a bigger impact. But I also think there needs to be, and we were talking about this before the panel, there just needs to be more collaboration. I think there's some fantastic work going on that, you know, in the same sport or across sport, where the learnings aren't necessarily getting shared, and you're going to get, you know, a much bigger impact by, you know, bringing some of that stuff together and, you know, making a real difference. And what you don't want is one sport kind of cannibalizing another. You want to grow sport as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. I think we were talking about it before and saying collaboration is better than competition. So if we're going back to funding and money, if there's a bigger organisation and is piggybacking off something that, you know, one that has done great things in terms of their programme, it's about working together with them to make sure that it gets highlighted, rather than, you know, I've decided to do this because I'm a bigger organisation and the eyeballs on it will be stronger than, you know, somebody that's, you know, grassroots or smaller. For me, I gave myself a 4, didn't I? And I can appreciate I'm only 6 months into my organisation, so I kind of feel like I was being a bit humble because I feel like I'm doing a great job at the moment in time.
You are.
Thank you. But in terms of me increasing that, I think that it has a lot to do with speaking to the workforce and making sure that you're having those uncomfortable conversations. Most of the time, we don't have uncomfortable conversations within our workplace, and those are truly the ones that are meant to be had, and those are the most important. And previously at my former organisation, when you're having those conversations, making sure that your workforce actually believes that you're going to carry through those things, and it's not performative allyship, and it's not box ticking. You're just saying, oh, we're going to do this because it makes us look good. It's not about that. It's about making sure that everybody is heard, and you've got that kind of like psychological safety where people can bring up things and know that they won't get punished for it. So yes, I think that's...
Sorry, I've got one more point. I know periods and women's health have been mentioned several times throughout. I will just want to give a shout out to Fab Little Bags. I don't know if you've heard of them. Martha is a fantastic lady. We provide free period products for all of our sessions now. That are basically a coach, is it acts as a first aid kit. Coaches carry it around with them at all time with period products. But not only that, Martha has upskilled our development officers and coaches and staff around periods, the taboo periods, the challenges that you face. So if your organisation or any sporting sector needs that, then I would highly recommend reaching out to her, because we've had a few coaches saying they've been coaching women and girls for years, and it really opened their eyes to the challenges that they go through. And again, I think that's such an important, if they need to understand women's health. It's been recognised so many more times, so please reach out to her if you need her contact details. She's not here today, but I'm sure she'll love the shout out. Thanks, that was it.
I'm actually going to go to a question because it actually builds on something Charlene was saying, so I might come to you first to pick up. It was about, I can't tell who asked the question, but I can, Claire Robinson, thank you. In your experience at your organisation or working with other organisations, what is the best way to hold individuals and teams accountable for inclusive hiring and retention practices? And I think that's also potentially about accountability, about EDI topics more broadly. So Charlene, something you were saying is about, it sounds to me like you are the one who's accountable, the buck stops with you, it's your organisation. Do you want to just build on that and how you can instill that sense of responsibility across your team, if you're hiring, if you're looking to retain the talent you've brought on board? How do you make sure that it's not just a sort of tick box exercise and then it's really embedded in the culture of the organisation?
I think it's something I just said previously before, like speaking to your workforce, making sure that everybody believes that their voice is actually heard. Having conversations with them, making sure that, even though the buck stops with me and I decide, the final decision, making sure that they all believe that when they're coming to me with issues or when they're coming to me with ideas, I'm actually listening, and I'm not just going to be like, okay, I've heard what you said, but I'm just going to go with my idea anyway. It's making sure that everybody feels that they're valued, and I think that is so important in any organisation, that people feel valued, and that's how you're going to build on and, gain retention. Because if people don't feel valued, they're just going to leave. And I believe that, making sure that everybody feels that they've got they've got a voice. Because if you don't feel like people have a voice, then, it's just going to cause friction, and then people, like I said, are just going to leave. So I think that's really, really important. And in terms of, so what was the last point you said?
It was about the best way to hold individuals and teams accountable for inclusive hiring and retention practices.
Okay, so I'm not telling everybody to do this. I don't want you guys to get fired or anything. But for me, I've always been somebody that's, as you can tell, somebody that's quite bold, and I like to call people out. So if I see some BS happening, I will very much say, I thought you said you were going to do this by this time. And just making sure that you hold them to account in terms of the time frames that they've said that they're going to do things. If people say, oh yeah, we're going to be having 20% of our workforce by 2025, and you're looking at 2025 and we're very much halfway through the year and it's still at 10%, it's not going to happen, is it? So making sure that you're holding people to account and having those conversations, picking up with them, bi-weekly or bi-monthly, and again, having those important conversations, because if you're not having those important conversations, nothing is going to change. And, having excuses of, it's a long-term project, I get that, but how long are we going to wait for things to actually improve if we're not the ones to improve it? And I always say to myself, if not me, who? So that's exactly why I decided to start my own business, because I just realized that it was taking too long for things to happen. So I decided to, be bold and do it myself.
That's excellent. Does anyone have anything to add? Those of you who work within an organisation, you might not have specifically got hiring under your purview, but do you know of best practice within other organisations for really making this part of, who's accountable? How do you make sure it happens?
I mean, I can add to that, as we work with a lot of organisations, and I think the first thing I would say is there's a lot you can do in terms of the processes that you have in place to make sure you take bias out of promotion, recruiting, and you really need to kind of be tracking data if you can, and you'd be amazed at, we work with some very big organisations that don't really track anything. And I think it is around taking things further than doing, a yearly employee opinion survey, where quite often people are worried about the confidentiality of the information that they're giving. So, there's a lot more detail you can go into, but I think there's a lot of organisations that, are very proud to have their values on the wall of their reception, but the behaviour that's going on doesn't match that, and they're too scared to have that conversation. And so if that sounds like something that resonates, then, people need to speak up, and people need to speak up when they see the bad behaviour. It isn't just the person that it's happening to's responsibility. So getting that culture that Charlene's kind of talked about, psychological safety, and making sure that people are able to do that and they're being supported to do that is really important.
And I think there's an element where leadership at some level has to buy into that and be ultimately accountable. So if this is a policy within your organisation, or if you have values but the behaviours don't match the values, you have to be able to speak up in a way that's safe for you, but also that action will take place, not that things are brushed under the carpet, I guess. Does anyone have, I'm aware of the clock is ticking down, but I want to give people the chance to add if there's anything to add.
So one thing I found, so I'm my EDI network group's chair, so something in my day-to-day job I might find it a bit hard to challenge someone on the behaviour, but in my role as EDI network chair, that's one thing that I found gives me a lot of a bit of power, and it kind of gives me a way in to have these conversations, because I think that's half of the battle. But I can be like, well, as EDI network chair, I've noticed X, Y, Z. So that's one way that has really worked for me, and may work for you also.
I think just from a disability lens, don't say you're inclusive and accessible when you're not. Have you asked a disabled young person? Have you got individuals into your office with varying disabilities, not just those in wheelchairs? Before you've done that, then please don't pretend that you are, because if an individual goes there with a disability and has an experience where they can't get up the stairs, for example, or it's overloaded with lights because of the sensory, then it's really off-putting for them, and then we're discouraging them even further from getting involved in a job that they obviously are passionate about doing.
So the idea is to show clear intent and then to back that up with action. And I think on that note, we're coming to the end, so I'd just like to thank the audience for the questions and for listening, and to thank the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.